The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the SpotTrack.com podcast. My name is Paul Peck with the founder and editor of SpotTrack.com, Mike Giannetti, our regular third member of our crew here, Kevin Sylvester, off on assignment, so Kevin won't be with us today. But, Mike, here we are with the pre-free agency, current negotiating period version of the SpotTrack podcast. So as we record this on Monday afternoon, stuff has started to fly, and likely before we're done recording this, more stuff will fly. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that you've already seen happen that are sort of market trend setters, and because we know there's going to be a lot more things that will happen before Wednesday.
There will, but there's a reason we're doing this on the Monday. I mean, anybody waiting until Wednesday is
too late.
2.5 days
too
behind.
late.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, noon hit and bang, bang, bang. For deals in. So.
Right. So obviously deals are flying all around the NFL. You know, announced deals that will be official Wednesday. We've already seen some new highest paid players at positions. So we'll talk all about that. But I guess we have to start with the place that we've talked for the last couple of weeks, because we now have a final resolution to where is Antonio Brown going. And we know he's going to Oakland. And boy, this was an interesting weekend with a lot of ups and downs. And I've got some thoughts on the fact that, you know, he forced himself into this situation. And he got exactly what he wanted to, right? He got paid, which if that's all that Antonio cared about, then congratulations, Antonio. But you forced yourself into what is a far worse situation than one you're coming from. And good luck to you out there in Oakland/Las Vegas, where you have no idea who your quarterback is and you're on a bad team. So, you know, hey, God love you. Enjoy your paychecks. But the way he went about it, I didn't like, and I think it sets a bad precedent, because bottom line is he got what he wants. So why wouldn't everybody else in the league that wants to get what they want do the same thing?
Well, let's preface this with the point that we are in Buffalo right now.
Yeah, well, that's another factor in
and
all of this.
I did get up at 2 a.m. because I thought that, you know, all hell was breaking loose, and Ian Rappaport was reporting that this thing was done, right? Antonio.
Close. So in Ian's defense, he said
not final,
close
but
to a
agreed.
deal. Okay.
Right.
Well, see, I don't even know. I saw the one that said close, and which obviously proved to not be true and set everybody off in Buffalo thinking that the deal was squashed by Antonio's lack of desire to come here, which, depending on who you want to believe, because Rosenhaus has addressed this a little bit, he said it never got to that point. But ultimately, you know, I would suspect the Bills did not want to meet the full price, which is what it would take for Antonio to be willing to play here.
Sure. I think a lot of teams were at that point, right? We'll definitely take him, and we'll give you 2 picks for him, but there's no talking about this contract, which generally I'm pretty pessimistic when it comes to this stuff. But I have to say, if you're giving up 2 picks, right, and he's
a third to fifth, granted,
right, it wasn't even a 2.
Yeah,
right,
amazing, isn't it?
But if that's what you're giving up, that's still a decent amount of draft stock, right? For a team heading towards the draft here.
It is, but
it
you're
is.
Also getting...
Well, I mean...
I think we would all agree that is an incredible bargain basement price for the quality of player you're getting. But now, again, you have to think of it is if you're going to make Antonio as highly paid as he was, you're going to go to the Steelers and say, if I have to pay what I'm paying for him, I'm not giving you what you think his value is.
Here's the thing. He's getting 31 million guaranteed over the next 2 years, assumedly, right?
Right.
He was already getting 26 million cash on his past deal.
So it's really only a slight gain?
It's like 5 million more, but all of it guaranteed. And that's the kicker. The Steelers don't guarantee these salaries.
Okay.
So the Steelers were out because the Steelers were never going to do this. And they've already restructured them twice. It's done.
Right.
They did.
Aside from all the off the field stuff.
Yeah.
Contractually, they were done there.
But when you dig down into this, and I haven't seen the structure yet, but everything I've heard and read assumes it's 31 million guaranteed over 2 years, which is fine. That's 15 and a half for your number one receiver, which any team he's going to, that's what he's going to be.
Right.
So if we're talking in those terms, we're talking about a $5 million increase, and we're slapping a guarantee over 2 years, which that's normal.
Right.
That's normal for an elite wide receiver.
Right.
I have to be
a 31-year-old wide receiver as well, too.
Still.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that his production is going to fall. His production may fall because of who he's playing with and around. But yeah, I'm with you. But it's still 31-year-old receiver who's not getting better. He's getting worse at that age.
Sure, but 15.5 is not top of the line market.
Ridiculous. Yes,
it's not
for a team that had a lot of cap space.
Right. So when you break down the numbers and you're only adding $5 million and you're getting that player and you're only giving up the 66th pick and the 140th pick, right? Which we've talked, exhaustively about how if it's out of the top 100, it's garbage, basically.
Absolutely.
So it's really one pick and $5 million more that you had to guarantee. So the deal to me was secondary, even though everything I've read and heard and Rosenhaus has said, that was the key. That was the key that left a lot of teams out. That was the key for what Antonio Brown needed. Now, if the Bills were in that camp, I get it, right? $30 million cash, that's going escrow. I get it, right? That's a lot of money.
But they had to know what neighborhood they were dipping their toes in when you pick up the phone call. So, again, which leads me to believe that I do think that maybe Antonio had a list of teams he wanted to go to and a list of teams he didn't.
I'm with you there.
And maybe in Antonio and Drew Rosenhaus's world, in order to convince him to go to Buffalo, they may have had to gone $40 million guaranteed just to change his mind. And again, inherently, that's what bothers me a little bit because Antonio Brown controlled this situation from through and through, and he did it by doing one of the things you're never, ever supposed to do as a professional athlete, which is quit on your team.
He did. And to me, that's the point that's being undersold here, right? It's not about the demand, right? It's not that he came out and said, I need more money. I want off this team. I hate my quarterback. The last game and a half last year, he was basically off that team. He was on the sideline. He was doing nothing. He was off that team. That should be addressed more and more. Maybe there's a suspension. Maybe there's a conduct suspension coming for a situation like that. There should be.
Great players get away with a lot of stuff.
They do, and he is a great player, and that's what I mean. Let's not spend too much time on this. I just think if you had ambitions and your team was going after Antonio Brown, and what you hear is they weren't willing to guarantee him any money. That's an F for me.
Yeah, well,
that's an F for me.
And honestly, again, so now let's look at it from the Raider perspective. Yeah. Obviously, they have a coach who tends to lean a little more towards the veteran players.
Yeah.
You have a new general manager, but I think we all know Gruden is pulling the strings there with Mike Mayock. They're a team that is bereft of stars, partly because of their own trading away of them. You're a team that's moving into a high-profile headlining market, so that means somewhere along the line you say we got to have a few star players to sell to the people in Vegas. So from a Raider perspective, based on what they gave up, I guess it's a good deal for them. I don't fault John Gruden for making the effort. Like I said, they don't really know who their quarterback is. They don't really have a very good team right now. So I don't know what Antonio Brown thinks he's getting into. But from a Raider perspective, what are your thoughts on just looking at it from the team side?
Yeah, I agree with the Carr stance. I think Carr remains in 2019, and they see how this goes. But he's on a year-by-year deal now.
And you don't think there's a chance they draft a quarterback pretty high?
Of course they do, because my next point was they still have 5 top 100 draft picks.
Right. They're gonna use one of those on a quarterback.
Yeah, of course, and a wide receiver. By the way, I mean they're gonna do this. They're gonna turn all this over. Like I said, it's a 3-year deal for Antonio Brown. That's most likely a 2-year deal. So this is a short window. I don't think they do very well in those 2 years. Unless Derek Carr returns to 2016 form.
Well, they did just sign the highest paid left tackle in football as well too. Unless you're holding that for our next segment.
You know what else? You know what else Trent Brown was? The 30th rated offensive tackle according to Pro Football Focus.
And again, I think you should all have 30th. Learned your lesson, and all you have to do is point to Nate Solder and now Trent Brown to say, how good was Trent Brown? How good was Trent Brown because he had Tom Brady and the Patriot system around him? And tell you what, you are polar opposites to the Patriots, Tom Brady, and the Patriot system. They're where you're headed now. But again, good, God love you. He cashed in.
He did. Yeah, he got what he wanted.
He was a decent player in San Francisco 2 years ago as well, too, right? Before the Patriots traded for him.
The goddamn Patriots, though. The Patriots
Do they
gave
know
up
how to play
nothing.
This stuff or what?
The Patriots gave up like a 5th-round pick to get him from San Fran.
Yeah, and won a Super Bowl.
Turned him into a left tackle in about a day and a half.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. Won the Super Bowl, and then
when his price got more than they were willing to pay, they're like, okay, see ya.
Now they get a 3rd-round comp pick out of it.
That's the other thing we talked about this last week.
The train just keeps on rolling, It's crazy. I will say this.
And they'll get a 3rd-round comp out of Trey Flowers as well, too, who's also on your list of people to talk about.
One negative point to the Patriots, though, and it's surrounding those 2 players. Both of those players were bona fide free agent stars here. Maybe 2 of the top 3 free agents on the market, right?
True.
They were going to get paid huge money. They were going to reset their positional markets, and they both did. Why didn't they get a franchise? Why didn't one of those players get a franchise tag?
That's a great question.
Because if there's a franchise tag,
Flowers more so,
right?
I think, because he's a better player,
but it's a higher tag,
right?
So it's harder to trade
and again, here's what makes the Patriots among the most amazing things.
Let me jump in.
Okay.
It wasn't a tag to keep him, by the way. I'm talking a tag to trade him.
Trade him.
Right? Because then you've got...
to get the picks back? Well, because they probably knew nobody was going to do that.
See, I disagree. I think the market for the edge defender got so thin when the tags came out. Trey Flowers was far and away the top free agent. Far and away. I mean, he got $17 million without even trying here.
You think teams around the league are also scared off by the same thing that we just talked about with Trent Brown? Apparently not. Apparently no. But I mean, are teams starting to get scared off about Patriots free agents?
Well, of course. Every team should be, of course, except for the Lions. But
right.
The Lions signed about 4 of them today. But look, Trey Flowers didn't have 10 sacks. He had 6 and 7 over the past couple of years. But he's a forced fumble kind of guy. He's pretty good back in the coverage. He's a complete player.
He was a second or third round draft pick?
Yeah, he's a nice
player. The Patriots are clearly saying we'll go find it. This is a deep draft for pass rushers.
Yeah.
We'll go use one of our multitude of picks on the next.
I guess that's my point, though. I think if they slap a tag on him and make him available via trade, I think they get that pick back. I think they do, and they go shopping with that. I wonder if
that's interesting because normally they're the one team that does that.
Well,
I'm
not going to blame them because we've gone through a few years here where that just doesn't happen.
Right.
The franchise tag has become untradeable. Number one, because the price is so high now on most of them. But look, it's no secret that this salary cap has risen so much in the past couple of years that the numbers are stupid, and we're going to talk about these stupid numbers. The franchise tags are no longer anomalies. They're just mixed in with the rest of the salaries now. So if that's the case, I expect next year this conversation to become a forefront. I think if you're going to tag a player, who's sitting on a 5th-year option right now, that player should have trade value because it's going to be you don't want to have to deal with what we just saw. You don't want to have to deal with this bidding war that's for some of these players, especially in the secondary. Holy cow, that we saw just to get a guy into camp. So that's for me looking forward to next year already. That's something I think that has to come back around. If these franchise tags are going to be in the mix, tag your player, get what you can. Look at Dallas is trying like heck to sign all these guys. But if they're not going to get DeMarcus Lawrence done, they have to trade him, and that will be the new barometer.
You can't have that big a payoff for a player.
No, you can't have that tag, cap.
Before we get to rattling off some of the other news of the day here, the one other point I was going to mention to you about the Patriots was here's where they're completely opposite of what every other team in the league does. Normally, you don't let your good players leave. You don't let your good players walk. That's sort of a mantra for every NFL team. We have good players. They're good, young, productive players. We know we're going to have to pay them. We will pay them in order to keep them. What the Patriots do is completely the opposite. And Trey Flowers is a prime example of that, more so than Trent Brown, was we developed a draft pick of ours into a really, really good impact player, and instead of trying to trade him, we let him go.
Yeah.
And yet it does not hurt their sustained level of success, which is amazing because there's not likely any other of the 31 NFL teams that could operate that way and still be successful.
No, that's been said.
So how do they do it?
Yeah, it has to be. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you come from a situation where scouting's a big deal. It has to be that every role has a specific set of parameters.
No question.
Right?
That's totally the Patriot
they know
way.
exactly what they need to go find to replace Trey Flowers right now. And they've probably got 6 guys on a list somewhere to do it, whether that's a free agent or whether that's a draft or both probably. But they just must have, their system is so evolved now.
Well, when you say scouting, though, I think I want you to be specific because their drafting history has been scattershot for the Patriots. It's good, but not always good. So maybe it's the pro scouting. Maybe it's the once you get it. Maybe it's the coaching. Once you get in the door here, we are going to coach you to your strengths. We're not going to ask you to do things you're not good at. Again, look at their offensive line. Look at the construction of their offensive line. Dante Scarnecchia, considered one of the best offensive line coaches, but it's okay. You're going to give me this free agent center, and I'm going to say, here's the 3 things I need you to do. We're going to coach you to be great at those. We're not going to ask you to do things 4, 5, and 6. And if you do those 3 things, you can be our starting center.
I completely agree. I just think, there has to be a parameter in place, right? There has to be. I mean, but this thing is 15 years old now, right? This
it's changed coaches and it's changed players.
But I don't think the schemes have changed that much, right?
And it hasn't changed the most important guy.
Yeah, of course. But to that point, I just think it's like a
two
slot.
most important guys.
Of course. Yeah, of course. All right, let's get to some of these.
Okay, all right,
they are rolling in as I'm having.
I'm sure there's 3 more since we started this.
They are.
So go ahead, hit me up with.
Let's
what
start
you're
with
seeing.
Trey Flowers. Let's start with it. I don't have the total numbers yet, but it looks to be about 5 years, $80 million.
All right. Where does that fall in the world of defensive ends, pass rushers?
$17 million. I mean, that's top 5, top 4 right now. So he better be great. Right.
Yeah, Matt Patricia better that pounded on the table, and he better be right. Again, there's that history of guys once they leave New England, they're not ever as good as they were.
Let's stay with the Lions. Let's just go right down the Lions today because it has been pretty impressive here. They signed Justin Coleman away from Seattle, who's a nickel cornerback.
But a very good one.
$9 million a year, though.
A lot, that's right.
Completely reset that market.
Corner in the league, right?
Completely reset that market.
Right.
This morning earlier, they agreed with Danny Amendola.
Okay. Who's, I think, on the tail end of his career.
Almost $6 million. 4.5 guaranteed.
1 year deal?
Yeah. We talked about Trey Flowers. That's the big payday, obviously. They just bring in Jesse James, tight end from the Steelers.
Who I think was pretty well sought after around the league.
Yeah. So that's the Eric Ebron replacement right there.
Right.
They're rebuilding it all from the ground up here, and they're using free agency to do it, which is something we have seen be unsuccessful so many times over the past years.
Yes.
So it's dangerous.
Now, unless Matt Patricia smuggled out that Patriot Way Bible on his way out of Foxborough, he better be right, because if he's not right, he'll lose his job and he'll set that. And I know their GM is a Patriot guy as well too.
The former scouting director / player personnel guy. I mean, this guy knows the inside of the Patriots more than anybody.
All right, so that and again, whether they've got the trademark on the building, great. If not, you're both out, and you'll set the franchise back for a lot of years. But again, it's Detroit, so setting it back isn't a really high bar.
I like that. All right, let's keep going. I mean, anything else to say about Trent Brown?
No, other than again, that just smacks of me of the worst signing of whatever's going to happen over the next 2 days.
It was released
you took a
12:01
You took a good guy and paid him like he's great, and the only reason he was great was because of who he was playing with. And now you're gonna ask him to be the cornerstone of your offensive line with a mediocre quarterback, and he doesn't have the ability to do it.
John Gruden couldn't wait to get that one out to the media.
Oh, was that literally
the first one? It was bang.
Okay.
Schefter. That was Schefter's first tweet.
Right.
So those are coming, but you never know who it's going to be, and it was the big one. It was a big splash. So it's a 2-year deal. So let's not get crazy.
Okay.
It's 2 for 36.
That's good.
Yeah, it's on its edge. It's gonna and by the way, to go back to a recent podcast we had, it's heavily second-year loaded. $21 million salary
in Vegas
because of the move to Vegas.
Yeah,
anticipated move.
It's funny watching Trent Brown play because we see so many Patriots. He's huge. He's one of the largest left tackles in the league, and you watch him, and you're like, that guy doesn't look like he can play at all. He doesn't look like he can move. He doesn't look like he has any flexibility. He just looked too big. But again, to his credit, he was a really good player, we think. Or he was made to look really good, which is what we'll find out.
Look, Derek Carr holds that ball a long time.
Yes, he does.
Trent Brown is going to have to become an athletic left tackle in the next 6 months and
I don't think he has that in him. That's not who he is.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is risky. It is dangerous, but it is a 2-year deal in terms of the guarantees. And I do have the structure on the site already. So anyone who wants to take a look at that, it is a straight 2-year deal with options thereafter. Let's keep moving here. Oh, man, they're rolling in nice here. Couple of small Bengals signings, really nothing to talk about there. Let's see. What did you think about Dwayne Allen? Miami. That's Miami's only signing, by the way.
A good signing. Because I think that's a guy who was asked to play a very small role in New England and was pretty good at what he did. And you felt like that was a guy that a team that had a bigger role for a tight end was going to be all over. I don't think he's not an 80 catch a year guy, but he's a 40 catch, short yardage and red zone, but mostly a blocker. Yeah. So yeah, I like that. I like that signing.
Me too. They're going to slow play this free agency because they're going to wait and probably release Tannehill post June 1st. There's going to be a lot of moving parts in Miami. I mean, they're going to need a quarterback too.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to move up.
Draft one or aggressively go after one.
I think they have to move up in the draft to get one.
Yeah,
just the way it's kind of hashing out
teens,
here. Yeah,
right?
they're gonna have to move up if they want one of those top two. Otherwise, that could be a situation where Blake Bortles or one of those guys land. It could very well be. Speaking of, no Nick Foles news yet. I hear it's coming though. It sounds like Jacksonville is the one and only
deal.
Yeah, one and only is Jacksonville.
Okay.
Let's go back to the defense. First of all, Malik Jackson, were you around for this situation?
No. Well,
Okay.
You mean what happened with his release there? Because he was only been in Jacksonville for a couple of years, and he was really a player credited with a lot of their success 2 years ago.
Yeah, he actually made $45 million over the past 3 years though, so he did well financially for a team that just blew up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the defense was ready to go, and that team just blew up.
But when they were going, he was a big reason why.
Sure. It's a great signing for Philly. The point I wanted to make was ESPN originally reported this as a 3 years, $10 million contract.
Yeah, no way.
And we all freaked out. I basically had a heart attack because that's bonkers money.
Right.
It's 3 for 30, $10 million a year.
So the Eagles get rid of Bennett, trade him to New England, and essentially replace him, even though it's tackle for end, but replace him with another good, solid veteran.
Jackson can get to the quarterback.
Guys want to play in Philly, and they want to play in that D line,
right.
don't they?
They're becoming a little bit Patriot-ish.
Yes.
They're starting to get some nice value deals. Howie Roseman is a trader, and that is a TRADER, by the way.
Right.
He always has been, and it's to his credit, and that is starting to pay off because that's an underrated point of what the Patriots do. They trade people all year round.
So you're talking about Fletcher Cox and Malik Jackson as their 2 D tackles. That's pretty good. But
Brandon Graham on a 3 for 30. I mean, really nice value for these couple of acquisitions or guys they kept around. There's a wide receiver to be had there. It's coming somewhere. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
You mean they're going to trade one, or
no,
sign
to bring
one?
in?
Right.
I would assume there's
there was
a draft
some talk
pick.
about them trying to trade Aguilar too.
Or maybe just outright release.
Right.
Yeah, I think they want that in terms of the cap space they need. They might have to let him go before Wednesday. No dead cap to do that, by the way. But my guess is they're waiting on Deshaun Jackson to be released.
Yeah, which it sounds like he supposedly there was some comments that said he's done there, and that was trade or release from Tampa.
I think they're just trying to use the next 2 days.
So he goes back to Philly then and finishes his career there?
To me, that's what it sounds like. We'll see how that hashes out. But yeah, they're not going to trade for him. They want to see, and they want to get him on their own terms, which, as we've seen, has worked out well. Before we get to the Redskins, let's go out west. San Francisco 49ers, Quan Alexander, an inside linebacker.
Tampa Bay, right?
Yeah, Tampa. Tore his ACL last year. Was on track for monster money. Tore his ACL, so his value dipped because of it. But this guy's kind of like a horizontal linebacker, but also a safety. I mean, his coverage is outstanding.
And I pardon me if I'm not entirely dead on with this. They're looking to replace what Reuben Foster had been able to give them some. As far as athletic ability at linebacker. That does sound like that's the replacement there.
If he's healthy, he's a freak. But he got money. He got 4 for 54.
Wow,
half of that's guaranteed. Coming off the ACL, so he reset the entire linebacker market at $13.5 million.
Wow.
So that's a big splash. Like I said, though, $27 million guaranteed now, so it's a 2-year guarantee. And San Francisco does rolling guarantees, which mean after that it's going to be year to year. Even Garoppolo, year to year. So nothing's too crazy with the San Francisco contracts. Although I do hear, and I believe it because I think it makes sense. I do hear they're a major Le'Veon Bell contender.
That makes perfect sense.
It does, because they probably can't trust Jerick McKinnon.
Nope.
Even though they paid him a boatload over 2 years.
And Le'Veon Bell at his peak is 10 times better than Jerick McKinnon. Not 10, but better.
Let me tell you who else they're in on. They are the one team making a big push for Odell Beckham Jr.
Well, I did see a little bit of chatter today that the market is still open on Odell Beckham.
Yeah, I mean, they do have the number 2 pick.
So, all right. So, however true that may be, they didn't want any part of Antonio Brown, which was the connect the dots team when this all started with AB, but they would want Odell.
Well, I'll say this.
Odell's younger.
I mentioned those rolling guarantees, and I wonder if Rosenhaus and Antonio Brown didn't want to deal with that kind of structure again. It's not as bad as Pittsburgh, who doesn't guarantee him at all, but they make you wait till April 1st every year to guarantee the salary.
Right.
That's just San Francisco's way. So I wonder if that kept Rosenhaus away from that, because they had to be interested.
You would think. I mean, that would seem to be the piece of the puzzle with Garoppolo and the offense that they built there.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say.
So what's it going to take for the Giants to be convinced to trade Odell?
You tell me. I mean,
is
certainly
it based
the number 2.
on the return?
I would think. They have to be blown away. They'd have to be blown away.
So is blown away holding out for a first?
Oh, I would think.
Although they're not getting San Francisco's first because that's a high pick.
It's the number 2. You don't think?
No.
You don't think?
I don't think San Francisco does that.
No?
Well, here's the question. How much has Antonio
What if it's a
Brown
swap of
set a
6 for 2?
market for wide receivers, or how much was his situation so unique that it isn't a market setter?
Yeah, his age kind of throws a wrench in this. I mean, Beckham's still so young, and he's in year 2 of this deal, right? I think that means...
So what are you talking about, a swap of what?
I mean, you could swap 6 for 2, right?
Yeah. That I could see happening.
Swap 6 for 2. But
And Odell Beckham?
Does that guarantee them Kyler Murray? What if they do it with plans to get Kyler Murray and still end up with Dwayne Haskins at number 2? A guy they probably could get at 6. That's what worries me about that deal.
Well, I don't know. Are we entirely sure that the Giants are taking a quarterback?
Oh,
I don't know that we are.
no? You think they're going defensive
I think
line?
it's possible.
Yeah.
So that makes that more sense if,
Sure.
again, if you can stay at 6 and get Dwayne Haskins, why would you move up? But if you aren't entirely going to get Haskins and you got the, you can go up to 2 and do whatever you want to do at 2.
Yeah. I like it. I at no point over the past 2 months that I think it was even going to become close that they traded him. But the Giants have to figure out who the heck they are.
Right. Well, they have to decide, and then that starts with Eli Manning. Are you ready to move on or not?
No, I'm okay with, I'm not because they're not going to win, but I'm okay with getting your quarterback now and slow playing him in with Eli as the veteran. But that should have been last year.
Yes.
Like they're a year late, maybe 2 years late on that.
Right.
But we're here, and that's the plan. They're not going to throw somebody in with Barkley and Beckham, around him. That makes sense, right? I mean, you don't want to do that to a quarterback.
No.
I mean, Odell Beckham Jr. with a rookie quarterback just sounds like a disaster, right?
Yes, it does.
It sounds like a disaster.
It does. But what if Odell isn't there?
I guess that's the point.
Right. And now you're going to build around Saquon
But don't
Barkley.
you think that's a big part of this? Is we need to flip the culture a little bit.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Right.
I think, and again, that's the big picture of what we've seen
that's
with
what I
wide
mean about who
receivers
we are.
forever, is that they can be team wreckers.
But specifically with this Giants team, who are so fragile right now, and if they're going to hang on to Eli, they're going to be crushed for it.
Yes.
So if they're going to draft the quarterback and Eli stays, then Beckham can stay.
Yeah.
Beckham can stay another year. You can do this trade next year if you need to. But if Eli's going, if you're going to bring in Kyle Murray right now, and he's going to start day 1,
you got to get Beckham.
You better make sure Beckham's on board, because you can't have him miserable week 4 on the sideline yelling at a rookie quarterback.
No, you're right.
So to me, that's one of the reasons you do this, is obviously you've got to be blown away with the trade conversation. But number 2, you've got to protect whatever this new quarterback's going to be if you're going to throw him out there week 1. We saw that in Buffalo with Josh Allen. There was a preservation point, right?
Yes.
And certainly a culture change. Now that seems to be gone now that we know they went after Antonio Brown.
Exactly.
But at least for year 1 of Josh Allen, it was about, we've got to slow play this and make this a welcoming place to come to, so that this guy can get his legs, and he did. I mean, by week 14, he looked good. So I sort of understand the Bills' philosophy. I know you had some trouble with the Antonio Brown situation.
Well, my beef with that is they've done nothing but preach about their
But
culture.
Don't you think it was for that? It was because we have to protect this young quarterback?
Just beyond that, it just aggravates me that we've been beaten over the head by the Bills front office and it's all about the team, and it's about the culture, and it's about guys that love football and that want to win. And it's all BS. It's all BS when you have a chance to get one of the best players in the league at a position that you are bereft of any talent, which is why I caution fans to not believe any of that crap, because in the NFL, it's all about talent, and it's always about talent, and you will convince yourself of anything when it comes to be about talent.
Speaking of those Bills.
You got some Buffalo news?
The Bills found it important 2 days before the actual league year start to sign Frank Gore to a 1-year, $2 million contract.
Frank Gore?
What is their average running back age right now? About 39 years old?
Yes.
I mean, what is going on there?
I don't get that at all. Man. So are you keeping LaShawn McCoy?
Maybe not Chris Ivory? Is that the guy who gets...
I would assume not Chris Ivory.
You got Patrick DeMarco
You can't go into the season with McCoy, Gore, and Ivory as your running backs. You must be getting rid of Ivory, and you're still going to hold that third spot to draft a young running back.
Man.
Frank Gore and LaShawn McCoy together?
Even if that's an okay move and he's a nice player for you, compliment player, did it have to get done on March 11th?
No.
Holy cats.
No.
I mean, it's not breaking the bank.
And again, see, here's where the Bills, where the hypocritical parts of the Bills comes in. Preach, 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 culture, 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 culture. Well, then we're going to go after Antonio Brown, but then we're going to bring in this great,
the safest signing of the world,
sage leader with the gray hair and running back because he's going to teach all our guys how to be winners. No, wrong. You teach your guys to be winners by winning. And how do you get to be winning? By getting good players, not Frank Gore.
Anyway, that's too much much for a Frank Gore conversation.
Any other wide receiver quarterback news so far today?
Not yet. The wide receivers have been light. Actually, I take that back. Jamison Crowder has agreed with the Jets, so take Adam Humphries off the Jets list. Me too.
Okay,
I think
that's
that
signing.
Jamison Crowder was a sleeper here for a few teams. So
he
that's
was
a nice
really
get.
good when they had some pretty good quarterback play in Washington. He was a really he's a slot guy. He's good at what he does.
Yeah, that's going to be a nice move for Sam Darnold in the long run here.
Yes, you want a guy. You want to have Sam Darnold have a reliable guy in the middle of the field like that.
Here's what I like. The Titans replaced Jonathan Cyprin with Kenny Vaccaro, who really had a nice comeback year. He really turned it around. I think
there's going to be a lot of safety swapping.
Holy cow, the safety list is big.
But I mean,
well, let's get to the big one, actually. We missed Landon Collins here. Okay. Holy cow, Landon Collins, by the way. 6 years, $84 million, $45 million guaranteed over the first 3 years with the Redskins teams that has no cap space. So this is probably it for them.
I like him as a player, but I think he's a little limited as a player, and he's not necessarily the player that has become what safeties need to be now, which are coverage,
he's a box guy.
which are 70, 60% corners, 40% safeties. He's a big hitting box safety.
100%. You hit the head, and because of that, do you know what I had him valued at? $8.6 million a year. He's a singular player.
Right.
He's not an across the board player, and he's the highest paid safety in the history of football. Wow. Now.
Leave it to the Redskins. It's always a Redskins move, right? It's always a Redskins move that guys go, what? Huh? What? Offensive lineman, anything there? I know a lot of teams chasing Paradise, the center from the Broncos, right?
Yeah, a couple of centers are going to get paid. Nothing yet. Jamison Crowder's deal is nice, by the way. 3 years, $29 million, $17 million guaranteed. Really, that's a good get for
good solid slot corner contract.
Yeah, that's a good get for them. So the wide receiver market sort of starts there. Like I said, Adam Humphries is soon to come. Tyrell Williams is soon to come. Golden Tate certainly soon to come.
I think Tyrell Williams is a guy that is going to be way overpaid by teams that are desperate because he's maybe arguably the top 3 available wide receivers, but he's never been that player. He's never been asked to be that player. He's never produced like that player with the Chargers. So some team's going to give him a ton of money and ask him to be a number 1 or a number 2 receiver, and then they're going to feel woefully underwhelmed when he unless he can develop into that. But he hasn't done that yet. He's sort of a streak down the field guy, which makes him good at that. But I don't know about a whole lot of other things
in a league where the go route is maybe going away.
Yeah, and in a league where there's a ton of wide receivers that seem to be more well-rounded in the middle of rounds of the draft.
Yeah, to me...
Now, all right, now let me say, before you answer that question, we've just talked a lot about guys being overpaid, okay? Which always happens this time of year. How much of that a product is this incredible amount of cap space that teams have to spend, and they probably know they're overpaying. We're like, yeah, whatever.
Right, and the numbers sound like it's overpaid, but if you change the percentages, and we've done that a few times on Twitter, and we'll continue to do that with the free agent markets here, the percentages are down. Okay. And what I mean by that is the cap is now so high that, for instance, Luke Kuechly's contract 3 years ago with the Carolina Panthers was like 8.5% of the cap. Well, if we talk about Quan Alexander, he didn't even get there. 8.5% of the current cap is $16 million.
Yeah.
So is that the number CJ Mosley is going to get here in a couple of maybe today or tomorrow?
It's an interesting way to think of it. It's the right way to think of it.
It is the right way. And that's why the numbers look crazy on paper and on Twitter and things like that. And they are crazy. There's a jarring increase, but the cap has increased more. So if you think about it in percentages, especially when you're doing these wide receivers, it sounds nuts to value Adam Humphries at $10 million a year because he's had 60 catches, and 5 touchdowns. But that makes him 20th among wide receivers. And percent of cap wise, I know you need to fit 4 or 5 wide receivers in, but what's 8% for a guy who's going to catch you 70 balls possibly? So that's the way to look at it, and that's the way we're going to start to spin it when we do some articles and things like that. Is percentage wise, the increase in the cap, $10 million over each year over the past 3 years, has given teams tons of cap space to work with. But
and the ability to carry it over from the year before.
The rollover, yeah. And let's not leave out education. I mean, there aren't.
They're getting smarter. Teams are getting smarter.
These option contracts where these 5-year deals are actually 2-year deals, like we've mentioned here today. Those make for more space. Right. Those clear cap space.
I know one of the things you're great at, and one of the things we like to talk a lot about here is trends. What trends are changing? Are you seeing any trend that you can point to just by the first day of this stuff?
Well, you mentioned the safeties market, and we've only hit the tip of the iceberg on that, and we've got Tyrann Mathieu, Earl Thomas, Adrian Amos. I can't even think of the other ones, but there's a list of like 9 great safeties, a few who have fallen off the board here with Vaccaro and Collins. But my thinking was going to be that was already a dwindling market financially. My thinking was a saturation like that in the free agent market was going to crush it. It's completely opposite. I mean, Landon Collins just broke the bank. He broke everybody's thinking about where this was going because Earl Thomas was initially this morning asking for 13 to 15 million. Well, now 15 is where Landon Collins pulls in with the Redskins. Earl Thomas might be close to 16 million, and he's 30 years old. So if that's where the barometer, if that's where the high gets, the ceiling, then all this trickle down from there. That market has completely reset. The running backs are still where they are, unfortunately. I mean, you had Kareem Hunt sign at $1 million,
right?
For unfortunate circumstances, but he was a guy who should have reset this market. Le'Veon Bell, I still think will, especially in San Fran.
Any other rumors on Le'Veon other than San Francisco?
Just the Jets.
The Jets.
I think it's. I would agree, I would think down to the Jets and the 49ers. The Raiders made a ton of sense, but they've pumped so much cash into these next 2 years, and cash matters. By the way, cash is. The guaranteed cash dollars come out of the owner's pocket immediately.
Right.
So if you have to give him $35 million guaranteed, I think the Raiders are probably out in that regard, but San Fran will do that. Maybe the Jets won't. I'm not sure what the Jets are. I thought the Jets would be a lot louder today, and they haven't been.
They're number 2 in available cap space behind Indy, right?
Yeah. So either they're waiting on something or they're just kind of being smart and letting things settle down after this initial day.
I think it's interesting that, correct me if I'm wrong, the top 4 available cap space teams are the Colts, Jets, Browns, Bills.
Texans are in there too.
All right. Yeah. Most of them have been quiet so far.
Quiet, which makes sense.
Which is kind of the opposite of what I think a lot of fans would have expected. But I think you have to understand that just because you have it doesn't mean you have to spend it. And frankly, history tells us when you don't spend it, you're better off. Because I think
to most degrees.
I think 50 to 60% of the deals that we just rattled through here today, teams will regret at some point very quickly.
I'd have to agree with you. I mean, let's talk about Trey Flowers, right? The Jets were in, the Colts were in, a lot of teams were in. But when it got to $17 million a year, I bet you a lot of them were laughing, because don't you think all of those teams are thinking they can wait a couple of days and sign Justin Houston at like $10 million a year,
or wait another 6 weeks?
Justin Houston's got like 30 sacks over the last 3 years.
Or wait 6 weeks and draft one of the 8 to 10 really good edge rushers that are available.
I just think there's a second tier of free agents that are going to be available in 24 to 48 hours still, and those prices are going to be a third of what we saw today.
Yeah,
because
well,
that's
you've
how
been
it
on
works.
the Justin Houston train for a long time here, so credit to you. You saw this entire thing happen in Kansas City with him.
And to that point, D Ford's on the block. So if you're going to give up an asset and have to pay D Ford, that's a reason to keep cap space right now as well. If that's what the Jets are thinking,
so
or
you
the
think
Colts
Kansas
are
City
thinking,
could let both guys go?
Look, they're a mess, and they're a mess as it is. They have to sign Tyreek Hill. They're going to have to sign Mahomes in a year, maybe 2. But they are finally thinking window and not, and they're thinking offense to that point. So they can't get rid of Eric Berry this year. It's just not feasible based on the structure. So they have to maneuver elsewhere. Houston was the first chip to fall. It's not enough. They're going to have to do something else, whether that's a deal for D Ford that's cap friendly this year, which I think maybe they're against right now based on what they've had to do over the past couple of years. I just think it makes sense. Yeah, I think they're in the same thinking of the discussion we're having right now, which is we might even be able to get Justin Houston back.
Yeah,
right, at $9 million a year if we do this D Ford thing right.
You think they'd be all over that?
Yeah, they saved the $14 million by releasing Houston. I have to think that there's another tier. There's a plan B for a lot of these teams we've mentioned, the Jets, the Colts, that there's guys waiting in the wings right now, and the price is going to be so much cheaper than $17 million a year. It will be value by the time they get it done. So credit to them. Like I said, that's an education thing. It's the Browns were not this way. The Browns spent some money last year early with their $100 million, and so did the 49ers, obviously, with Garoppolo.
Who did the Browns just trade for in the last couple of days? A pretty good-sized name, right?
Olivia Vernon, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, giving up an offensive lineman who was falling out of favor there. So, yeah. Okay, here we go. Breaking news. Nick Foles, officially a Jaguar.
Okay. All right, you said something that I want to ask you about just because it brings back some interesting memories, but in a lot of ways it lays the groundwork for what we're talking about here today. You used it just in conversation on saying Plan B, and it takes me back to the old infamous Plan B free agency. You remember back in the 90s, it was really the first NFL free agency, and just to think of what that was then as to what it is now, and I don't remember the numbers, but I think teams could protect 37 players.
Yep.
And then, so basically players 38 to 53 were in an available pool of free agency.
It's like an expansion draft every year.
It was, and it was crazy. And the smart teams were able to recognize some talent within that group of guys and bring some guys in. They were usually older or they were younger and untested, but it was very interesting back then.
So that brings up another great point here. That's another thing these teams are waiting for. All teams. Adding players means having to subtract players. Right. There's still a whole wave of cap casualties coming here. A whole wave of them. And there's going to be some real players in that list.
Right.
So that's Plan B, maybe Plan C for some teams is let's wait and see who's
and the
other teams' trash are going to be.
And the teams spend a lot of time studying other teams' rosters and salary structure to know, boy, this guy is a likely cut.
Yep.
So when they sit and plan their free agency list, it's not just a list that you can all call up online now. They've got guys on those lists that they think are going to be available.
But those have to evolve based on today's signings is my point.
Right.
All of those lists now have changed, right?
Sure.
Trey Flowers going to Detroit.
But I bet you the players that teams thought that were going to get cut 2 weeks ago are likely still going to be the ones that are going to get cut.
Sure. But I mean, a player like Ezekiel Ansah, is for sure leaving the Lions now.
Right.
For sure. That he's on the list now.
He's a free agent.
Yeah. But I mean,
he's not going back.
Obviously, he's not coming back. So that's what I mean. The list is fluid and it changes based on Monday, Tuesday.
But you're talking
Wednesday.
about guys that are currently on a team's roster that are going to be cut before Wednesday in order to make room for the ones that they're signing now.
That's what I mean.
And that's sort of the other hidden part of free agency that doesn't show up on your online list of guys that are available.
So that's the roster bubble list that I develop in January.
Right.
And I update every week for 3 months.
So have you had anybody interested in the roster bubble list in the last couple of days?
I haven't because I was sort of waiting to see how these things hash out. But a lot of those chips have fallen, I'll tell you that. A lot of them. A couple of wide receivers that I thought would go appear to be locked in. Allen Robinson with Chicago. That just seems like it's not working out. And I know he's coming back from an injury and they want to give him another year. But they could stand to do better at the wide receiver position with the rest of the roster intact at this point. And Emmanuel Sanders, I'm still not convinced that he's coming back. I know they picked up the option. It only guaranteed $1.5 million. So I'm still not convinced that he sticks throughout this entire offseason. He's a trade chip, in my opinion, because it's a pretty tenable contract for the last year. To me, that one's one to watch. He's been on my roster bubble list for a few years now, and now that they've got these kids in play and a halfway decent quarterback in Flacco who can throw the ball, I just think if they go and find a decent draft pick at a wide receiver, or if there's a free agent out there who they can replace Sanders with, that's a trade to be made.
All right, trade. You mentioned trades. We talked about the potential of Beckham. Any other chatter about guys that are trade possibilities? Because I think that's where that list of teams that we talked about that have all that cap room are probably thinking they're better served trading for guys with big cap figures that may get cut, or that teams would go, yeah, we don't really want to pay this guy, so what will you give us for him? So has there been anything interesting on that front that we could see?
I made a list this morning, actually. It was one of my first tweets this morning because I was thinking the same, that today's not just about signings. I mean, we've seen it more and more over the past few years. As soon as 4 p.m. on the new league year hits, one of the first breaking news stories that comes out is a massive trade.
Right.
We've seen it every year now for the past 3 or 4. So I think that'll happen again. And it could be a D Ford. It could be a Jerry Hughes out of Buffalo. It could be a Michael Brockers out of the Rams. I've even got 2 Tampa Bay Buccaneers on this list. Deshaun Jackson, of course, and Cameron Brate, the tight end, who I think is almost a guaranteed trade, just the way I think of it.
Because they've already got O.J. Howard.
Yeah, and Bruce Arians in tight ends is no good.
Yeah,
it's just no good.
That's a good point.
It just never has been.
Yeah, you're right. Although in Pittsburgh they had good tight ends when he was there, but
that's forever ago.
he
couldn't make it work in Arizona.
Tight ends were never really much of a factor.
They tried. They kept bringing him in, but it just really never worked out. So I just think O.J. Howard is an athlete. He'll stick for sure, and he's young and cheap. But Cameron Bate at $7 million, somebody's going to trade for that. That's a nice player. That's 60 catches.
As a starting tight end?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Couple of Raiders that probably have to go now after this Landon Collins move. Zach Brown for sure, I think, is going to go. He's a 100-tackle inside linebacker, and he's cheap now compared to the rest of the market.
Right.
And Mason Foster, the other one, because of Reuben Foster. I think both of those guys go. They're trying to get C.J. Mosley there, but I think he prices himself
Redskins,
out of
you
that.
said, right? I think you might have said the Raiders
Redskins.
there.
Sorry, Redskins.
Yeah, Redskins.
Both the inside linebackers and the Redskins, I think, will have to go in some capacity. A decent cornerback I put on this list, Xavier Howard, Miami.
Yeah, who had a really nice year last year.
He's a nice player, and look, the free agent cornerbacks are kind of garbage. And I think from what I'm hearing, the draft cornerbacks aren't that great either.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's a great year for corners.
He might have be a big play, and Miami needs to rebuild, and that'd be a nice piece to move and get some assets back for. So I think that's going to happen.
I asked you before. You said quiet mostly on the quarterback front, other than the Foles. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater.
Let's get the Foles. I got the numbers here.
Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, where Bortles? I mean, where's some of the quarterback play? Everybody's kind of got their starters right now. That Case Keenum is a Redskin, right? So really, there isn't anybody that doesn't have a clear-cut starter right now, right? Miami, and if they dump Tannehill,
it's going to be Miami.
I still think Bridgewater to Miami, it makes a lot of sense.
I think that's going to be the only option.
Well, that too.
Yeah, because let me get to the numbers here. Nick Foles, 4 years, $88 million. Can get to over 100 with incentives. So he got his $22 million.
Right. That's, you know what?
I think
it's more than he's worth.
Yeah.
But if you're a solid starting quarterback in the NFL with a track record of winning, you're going to get $20 million a year.
That's where it is. I mean, that's what Dak Prescott's looking at, right? About 22 to 23 right now. Probably more now with Foles getting 22. Right. But the guaranteed money's 50. So let's hold the phone on that, because that essentially means, that's probably 2 years at $50 million. So he got his $25 million a year.
Okay.
He got his Derek Carr contract.
All right.
Is what he got.
You know what? Again, that's the cost of doing business to sign a quarterback now.
It sure is, even in Jacksonville.
Right. So Bridgewater is intriguing to me because I still think he's got a kid with a lot of upside. He's certainly younger. It's unusual that a quarterback that young with some track record, both positive and negative with the injury, is available on the market. I'm frankly surprised there hasn't been more buzz about him or enough team. Again, even last year, he was, the Saints were willing to trade a pick for a guy they knew had likely no chance of playing there at all. And the Jets were more than willing to get rid of him because they knew he wasn't going to play there either. So maybe he isn't the same guy that we think of anymore, which tells me that maybe there is not a starting job for him.
Well, let me give you another tidbit. The Miami Beat guys this morning were pretty adamant about a connection between Tyrod Taylor and the Miami Dolphins.
Interesting.
This morning. So if that's,
hope you know what you're getting.
If that's the bridge quarterback before they get to their drafted quarterback,
that's the Golden Gate Bridge of quarterbacks.
But that is a name I heard. So I got to be honest, I haven't heard or read Teddy Bridgewater anywhere.
Okay, well then maybe I'm overestimating what the league thinks.
I don't
of
think
him.
you are. It's possible. It's possible that he's done. Isn't it possible?
Well, it's possible that he's never going to be the kind of starter he was pre-injury in Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Washington was a decent chance because he'd be cheap, and Washington had to go cheap.
Yeah, I mean, you think it's a better option than Case Keenum?
I don't think so.
I heard a Washington sports writer on a sports talk show today say, when asked about Case Keenum, is like, well, when you sign Case Keenum, you're guaranteed to be under 500. And I think the point he was making was, yes, is he a respectable NFL starter? Yes, but he's got 7-9 written all over him outside of one magical year in Minnesota when their defense was great and everything fell in place.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Can he start 14 to 16 games for you? Sure, and you get solid quarterback play out of him, but that was sort of my alluding to the joke of Tyrod Taylor. You're always going to be longing for more, and you should be expecting more out of your quarterback.
I'm trying to think in my head right now. So
maybe the Redskins are going to draft a young guy, and they want Case Keenum to be the placeholder for now.
I mean, there's a chance Bridgewater never starts again.
Yes.
Because if there's no one this year...
Which would surprise me, but I would understand it.
That's crazy. There's a chance.
Which tells me that he's just not. He's a shell of what he was.
There's a chance that Bridgewater, Tannehill, Bortles
never start another game in their career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Backups for life.
Yeah. Although they'll sign back to be backups in places, and because backups play, they'll play. But yes, that's a very interesting question. Will those three guys ever start another game in the NFL?
I shouldn't say that. I thought of a team. Tampa Bay is going to have to do something. Because if they don't love Winston, and this is it for him. This is the fifth-year option.
This is the last year, yes.
This is it.
So you're saying bring Bridgewater in as his backup and ready to take over?
To me, that makes some sense.
Okay.
That makes some sense. So maybe there's a possibility there. But yeah, it's getting thin. It's a complete 180 from last year. I mean, this time last year, all we were talking about was 8 quarterback openings.
Yes.
It's a complete 180. So, but it's going to be cyclical.
Don't you think a few teams learned their lesson last year too with that?
Are you talking about the Vikings?
I am talking about
Broncos?
the Vikings. Yes, I am.
Look, I want to end this podcast on Kirk Cousins because I put out a tweet. It was like a philosophical tweet, which I never do.
I like those.
I made a stance. I had a hot take. It was awful. But
it's not Mike's thing. Mike's a numbers guy.
I'm a facts guy.
And just a facts man kind of a guy. So yeah.
But I want to bring you into this conversation because here's my thinking, and of course it gets back to Antonio Brown because what else is there to talk about, right? If Antonio Brown's contract was fully guaranteed in Pittsburgh, 4 years, $68 million. He was 27 when he signed that.
Right.
If it was a fully guaranteed $68 million contract, are we even here right now?
So you're saying the Steelers would have had to have tolerated a lot of this bad behavior because they couldn't get rid of him because the contract was guaranteed, or
Both.
or is Antonio happier
Both.
because his contract was guaranteed?
Because he's guaranteed $15
I feel like
million
Antonio's
this year.
a guy that was never going to be happy. Based on the comments that were made, he had somehow gotten that bug up as you know what, that Ben was getting too much of the credit and he deserved more of it, and he didn't like taking a step back from the accomplished and acknowledged leader of that team and in that city.
Let me spin this off a little bit though. You're right, but I definitely think there's a chance he's happier.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Because he's probably still going to make $15 million this year. Right? Which is what he was set to make. It just wasn't guaranteed. But the point of this is because these contracts have this funny money, this fluff at the end of all these deals, right? Even the one signing today. Like I said, Landon Collins, $84 million, but only $45 guaranteed.
Yeah.
That's a ton of fluff.
Right.
A ton.
Yeah.
Because of that fluff, when you get into those years, there's so much what if. What if he gets released? What if he gets traded? What if it gets restructured? What if he's not happy? What if the team's not happy? All that exists because these deals aren't guaranteed. And I'm not necessarily pushing for every guaranteed or contract is guaranteed. I'm not saying that because I think that's a big step. But what if these elite contracts started to be fully guaranteed? What if Antonio Brown and Kirk Cousins and I get it. Who's elite, who's not elite. But Antonio Brown's elite. I don't think anybody's going to argue that.
I wasn't thinking of that when you said it. I was thinking of what kind of lessons are going to be learned from Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham's behavior. Because if they're going to be moved, it's because teams have just had enough of them. And that's more of a reason to me to not guarantee those deals, because particularly if a guy is signs of being a problem child, you don't want to be stuck with that.
One hand's got to feed the other. That the reason Antonio Brown was miserable is because he's got $39 million left on his contract, which he is not guaranteed if he busts his knee tomorrow. That's I give him credit for being miserable at that. And he's not said that. He's thrown his quarterback under the bus. He's thrown his team under the bus. He has not come out and said, I wanted more money. But I get it. Even if that's not his real point, I get it. Right? And players of this caliber, Odell Beckham should have a fully guaranteed contract right now. He should.
But there's only one guy in the league that has that.
That's right.
But
here's the point.
For you to say should, I think is a bit of a step forward.
No, I want to make that's the stance I want to take, because nobody's talking about Kirk Cousins getting moved. Nobody.
Right.
You're not removing Kirk Cousins from the Vikings in any capacity. You can't. And I don't want that to happen. Right. I don't want every player to be unmovable. I love trades. I love them.
I think the teams want to have that flexibility for when a player does something like Antonio Brown is they don't have to say, oh, my God, how are we going to handle this guy because we can't get rid of him now.
But
although maybe the Steelers would say for the dead cap hit and what lack of return they got, maybe they'd be going, we wish he was guaranteed.
It's a bad look right now.
Because we could go back to him and say, you're not going anywhere.
It's a bad look. And that look exists because of the fluff. We're here because the 3 years remaining on his deal were BS. That's why we're here.
Because all these contracts are BS.
Because Rosenhaus and Antonio Brown came forward and said, we can put the pressure on them.
The agents and the players for signing them take some of the blame, too.
Right. And that's
because we know why they're fluff. That's my point. Because if Landon Collins signed a 2-year guaranteed $45 million contract, it wouldn't get all the headlines and all the wows that the $85 million one does.
It's the same conversation we have with Bryce Harper. It's the exact same conversation, right? At some point, the two minds are going to come together, right? The teams are going to realize, well, here's the thing. Teams are fleecing the media right now.
Right.
Landon Collins is not a 6-year deal. He's never going to be in Washington for 6 years.
But that's how it's going to be reported.
Maybe not even 4, right?
That's how it's going to be reported, yeah.
But that's leverage the team has until Antonio Brown is my point. Antonio Brown took that leverage away because he's elite. Because Drew Rosenhaus said, we're not dealing with these 3 years of BS in this contract. We're done with it. If you're not going to guarantee it, and we know you're not because you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, we're done. We're getting the H out of here. That is a power move that worked, and it should have worked because that contract is bogus.
Right.
It's a bogus contract.
Are you saying to me...
What I'm saying is Kirk Cousins' deal is perfect.
No, I know, but perfect. I think what you're alluding to is this Antonio Brown thing could have been completely and totally orchestrated.
It worked.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it was on purpose. I'm not
trying to say Drew Rosenhaus orchestrated all this, but if there's any agent that we know of, he could be the one that would. And again, that's what I said to you at the beginning of this podcast. There's part of me that says Antonio Brown did all these things you're not supposed to do as an athlete, and he still won.
He won because the Steelers had the choice.
Right.
They had the choice. Right. They couldn't trade him to Buffalo. If you take the choice
away, then maybe the repercussions both are positive on both sides.
Think about it. If the $39 million was guaranteed, is that a tradable contract?
No.
Buffalo wasn't going to give him a deal. San Fran probably wasn't.
Right.
The Raiders did, and they gave him more. Right. So it probably, at the end of the day, was tradable. Oakland probably would have taken the 3-year guarantee, right? And that's fine. But it'd be harder, and that's my point. And my point isn't to make guys not movable. My point is I'm done with 6-year deals that are 2-year deals. Mm-hmm. I'm done with those. I'm done with the fluff, right? Because that guy is movable if it's a 2-year deal. He's going to free agency in 2 years, right? Which is he's going to be anyway. He's going to be anyway. The players and Rosenhaus, if this was a power move, it's a great power move because if this is him being, the forefront of and the leader of this pack to say we're done with the fluff, I love it. I love it. He did it with a 31-year-old wide receiver.
Yeah, which is amazing.
He did it.
Which is amazing.
All right, so it's time for... Look at Aaron Rodgers' deal is garbage compared to this.
Right.
It's garbage. He should be on a 4-year fully guaranteed deal. He should be the first player with a 4-year guarantee. He didn't do it. He didn't even come close to it. His cash flow is phenomenal. He's going to be happy for the rest of his life. But from a football business standpoint, he failed. And Aaron Rodgers failed because he had a chance to make a power move with a 4-year guarantee, and he didn't do it. So, to me, this was ugly. Here in Buffalo, it was really ugly in terms of Antonio Brown.
Yep.
But he won. And if this is a step in the direction for elite players to become that kind of focused and gain that kind of leverage, get rid of the fluff. Do it.
All right, so that's your lesson to everybody who's listening to this podcast. Do not pay attention to the fluff.
Yeah.
Go to spottrack.com and find out what the contracts really
out. We call it the potential out. It's on every player's page.
And don't listen and pay attention to all the numbers being thrown around by I think it's sometimes the lazy media that just repeats them. That's where you need Mike and SpotTrack to find out what the real truth is. Well, going to be more fun stuff that'll likely happen over the next 36 hours heading towards the official start of free agency Wednesday, trades and signing and releases. Best place to stay on top of all of it is spottrack.com. Give us a like on the on your podcast venues for listening to this, and stick with us. Maybe we'll have one later on in the week to wrap all this stuff up.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do that to wrap all this stuff up with a lot more to talk about. But thanks for joining us on our pre-free agency edition of the spottrack.com podcast.